Piers Morgan Uncensored is no longer on Talk TV, but it remains a major show on YouTube interviewing cultural luminaries such as Bassem Youssef, Andrew Tate, and the woman who is apparently the character behind the Netflix series Baby Reindeer. Last night, Michael Walker appeared on the show alongside pro-Israel influencer Hen Mazig, and I want to show just a few short clips from their conversation.
The reason that you think it was sort of justifiable for Russia to be kicked out of the Eurovision Song Contest was they had, it was a war of aggression. That's one of the ultimate war crimes. Now, another really important war crime is occupying someone else's territory and settling your people there, moving in your people. Now, whatever sophistry you might try and employ, I think you're going to struggle to deny that the West Bank is under Israeli occupation.
So there's Hamas in the West Bank? You're saying that there's Hamas in the West Bank? No, so it's Gaza, right? We're talking about Gaza. Don't conflate. Speak about each area specifically. We're speaking about Hamas attacking from Gaza, not about the West Bank. Leave the West Bank, please. Speak about Gaza.
But maybe it's you guys who should leave the West Bank. Right. Okay. It is, if we're talking about international law, which I think is very important, we need a framework
it is important.
As to how we can understand the world and how we can hold people to account. Now, you're absolutely right. Russia did conduct a war of aggression against Ukraine. That was against international law. Israel has also been conducting an illegal occupation for 57 years.
In a different area. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what area you're committing your international war crime, right?
Wait, so there is a Palestinian state, it's in the West Bank and Gaza? Or is it, any war crime that you commit?
I'm saying it's uncontroversial that Israel's been breaking international law for 57 years.
Here's my response. The UK broke international law with the illegal invasion of Iraq. That was 2003.
Yeah.
That's a much shorter time period than the one you're talking about. So why?
No, because it's not a shorter time period. This is important because I'm not talking about something that happened 57 years ago. I'm talking about something that's been happening for 57 years.
Right.
So Israel is still expanding settlements in the West Bank. I wanted to clarify that.
And for the record, I've been challenging them about the expansion of settlements. I think it's completely indefensible, right? I think the issue whether they're committing war crimes in their response to the October 7th attack has yet to be...
But expanding settlements is a war crime as well, right?
I believe expanded settlements are completely wrong.
But it's a war crime.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it's completely wrong.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the law. So Piers knows it's a war crime when Russia does something. He doesn't need the legal textbooks. I just know. It's in my bones. But when it's Israel, it's just wrong. Let's qualify what we say. I might be incorrect. And notice how Hen Mazig says stick to Gaza because that's where Hamas are. So why talk about the West Bank? The subtext there being that Hamas aren't in the West Bank. Okay, so why did the IDF kill over 300 Palestinians in the West Bank in 2023 and even more in 2024? Why are those people in the West Bank dying in response to October the 7th if Hamas is a purely Gaza issue? Well, it could be because Hamas isn't the major point here, believe it or not, but rather the fact that Israel doesn't want a viable Palestinian state regardless of who is in charge. That could be Hamas, it could be the Palestinian Authority as it is in the West Bank, it could be Bella Hadid or DJ Khaled, it doesn't matter. Hence, illegal settlements in the West Bank are fine, despite breaking international law and being universally condemned. If it was true that it was just Hamas who are the issue for the IDF, none of that would be happening. And this isn't a secret, by the way, about the West Bank. Israel Katz, who is Israel's foreign secretary, has been very open. He's an accessionist about Israel one day taking the West Bank and giving Gaza to the Egyptians to manage. Give them that bit, take this bit, push those people out, make this part Israel. Normal nation states don't behave like this, by the way. They also don't have settlers destroying aid which is destined for people starving to death. But we apparently think Israel is just a normal liberal democratic state. We have to defend it. It's just like us. We aren't like that. Even Britain's most trenchant critic wouldn't say that it's lowered itself to that. So when people refer to Israel as a settler colonial state, it's not an academic point. It's been ongoing in the West Bank for 57 years, every day. And that's before even mentioning the fact that the state of Israel itself was built dispossessing hundreds of thousands of people, previously inhabiting their own land, and then being alienated from their allegedly inalienable rights. That's what the Nakba was at the end of the 1940s. It's what Plan Dalet was, with the incipient Israeli state wanting as much land as possible with as few Palestinians on it as possible. That's always been the modus operandi, still is to this day. But we only think ethnic cleansing is bad when non-allied nations do it. It didn't all go Michael Walker's way, though, because at one point Piers thought he had him skewered.
What did you say publicly about October the 7th terror attack?
So, first of all, I said something along the lines of Palestinians have a right to resistance.
Then, that was your response?
Yes.
So you thought it was justified?
Okay, can you let me finish a sentence? Okay,
I'm stunned by what I've just heard.
It's because you're not letting me finish a sentence.
You think the 1,200 people being butchered, raped, burned alive, babies being kidnapped, Holocaust victims being kidnapped. You think that's somehow justified?
No, you haven't let me finish a sentence.
You said that your first response was to say Palestinians
Can you please let me finish a sentence? This seems a little bit pointless, okay? I have a very coherent position. If you would like to listen to it, I could have expressed it in about 20 seconds, but you kept interrupting
me. You said that was your response?
Okay. You didn't let me finish the sentence. Okay. Palestinians do have a right to resistance. That's enshrined in the UN, sort of in international law. They don't have a right to target and kill civilians. So the moment it became clear that they had targeted and killed civilians, I condemned that. I think you shouldn't. I don't think any.
Was it a terror attack?
I don't think any cause. Yes, I think it was a terror attack.
Okay, are Hamas a terrorist organisation?
I think pretty much. I mean, there are levels of it.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, that clip you just saw there was shared by Michael Walker online. He posted it because other people had been posting a clip version without him actually explaining himself at the end. Key context there. Pro-Israel people are only slightly misrepresenting him. That doesn't happen literally every day of the week. And he's right, of course. Legally, Palestinians do have a right to resist illegal occupation. That's not an opinion. You might not like it. It's a fact. It's codified under Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions and is affirmed under the right of self-determination of all peoples under foreign and colonial rule. Get this, the UN General Assembly has even expressly affirmed the right of Palestinians to resist Israeli military occupation, including through armed struggle. That's not somebody at Novara tweeting about October 7th. That is at the General Assembly of the United Nations. Now, if you think that's crazy, you might do, then ask yourself, why is it legitimate for Ukrainians to resist by armed struggle, but not Palestinians? And Michael made clear there in that video, the full video, that the right to resist can't include killing innocent civilians. That happened on October 7th, which is why at the time he deleted the original tweet as the situation on October 7th became apparent. If you were killing civilians because of the actions of the Israeli state, that would be collective punishment. Killing people simply for being members of another group, even when they haven't done anything wrong, is precisely why Israel is being criticized by the world and its wife regarding its response in Gaza. Collective punishment. It's a war crime. I know we can discuss the fact that the IDF killed many Israelis on October 7th too, which more recently came to light, but it's also incontrovertible that what Hamas did that day was itself, like I say, a war crime. The point is, if we're using the language of war crimes and illegality, which we should, the charge sheet against Israel is infinitely longer and goes back decades, actually more than half a century. Helena, what did you think of that interaction there between Michael Walker, Hen Mazzig and Piers Morgan?
And we watched the whole debate on stream, and I think I had an aneurysm, at least like multiple times during this particular discussion. And one point that really got to me as well was the Hen Mazzig tried to say, oh, well, you always cared about the Palestinians. So like, you always thought that Israel should have been banned from Eurovision because you're just obsessed with Israel. I'm like, well, they've been violating international law for all of this time. They should never have been allowed in. Like whatever happened since October the 7th is, is beyond the pale. What Israel's done in Gaza, but that is secondary to the fact that they've always been in a gigantic violation of international law with what they've been engaging in the West Bank for the last 57 years of their illegal occupation. They should never have been allowed a seat at the table, regardless, even before October the 7th. So trying to say that that's somehow a point in Hen Mazzig's favor is just completely nonsensical from him. And on top of that, this idea, this point that's kind of been tried to be raised by Piers Morgan, say, oh, you people are just obsessed with Israel. You only care about when it's Israel, when they seem to only ever care when it's Russia. When the left, we have been the ones who have opposed these kind of actions, opposed these kind of occupations that have been engaged in by countries that have been supported by the West for decades and decades and decades. Who was it who supported the UK government stopping arming Indonesia during their incursions into Timor-Leste or indeed their occupation of West Papua? It was the left. Who has been the people, right, who've been calling up, for example, the ethnic cleansing of the Nagorno-Karabakh? Like, we've been doing that the entire time. Who is the one who's been calling out Turkey's incursions into Kurdistan? It's been the left. So this idea that we only care about Israel and that we are somehow obsessed with it is just complete nonsense. It's completely untrue. And there's a really great clip that I saw. It came up on my TikTok feed yesterday. It was Bassem Youssef talking at some kind of thing, some kind of event. It was posted on India Today, talking specifically how propaganda is not just lies, it's also derailment. It's also this continual gish gallop of information being fired at you, saying, what about this? What about that? What about the tweets that you've made? This attempt for us to get to talk about literally anything other than the actual crimes that Israel has committed. And there's a reason why Hen Mazik says, well, don't talk about the West Bank, we have to talk about Gaza, even though this is the entirety of the context of the conversation that we're having. Because otherwise, Hen Mazik would have to admit all of the things that have happened, the Israeli incursions into the West Bank that happened even before October the 7th. What about the raids on Jenin? What about the raids on Nablus? What about the raids in Sheikh Jarrah? What indeed about the raids into the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, which Hamas have said was one of the reasons for their retaliation that they say is what their attack on October the 7th was? Because all it is an attempt to remove the context of this conflict out of the material situation at hand, which is, of course, that there is a illegal military occupation of both, indeed, yes, the Gaza Strip, and, of course, predominantly within the West Bank as well, that they don't want to acknowledge is the reasons why we have this continual conflict. At any point, Israel could cede to at least some of the reasonable demands of withdrawing to the 1967 borders, and then suddenly all of this would go away. All this would go away. They could not indeed allow, from Netanyahu, which we explicitly know now that he did, allow money to get funneled to Hamas through the Qatari government. All of these things could have been avoided if certain sections of the Israeli political class weren't desperately obsessed with the continued colonization of Palestinian land. But they won't do that. They won't do that, and the West won't call them out for it, so it will continue ad infinitum. And unless we have a proper conversation about the real and constant and consistent crimes of Israel, rather than just continuing getting derailed with all of the continual this kind of machine gun full of talking points you hear from the kind of Hasbara narrative from the pro-Israeli side, we'll never achieve peace, we'll never achieve a solution, and we'll continue like this forever.
Yeah, so well said. Look, people said there are no easy solutions. You could go to the 1967 borders. You could give people what they broadly want. And I've had this thrown at me so many times. Aaron, how would you feel if you were Israeli and you had people 30 miles away and they wanted to kill you and they had access to weapons and they were getting, hardware and instructions from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard? How would you feel? Okay, let me put myself in the shoes of a right-wing Israeli conservative. I would want a border. I would want a militarized border and give them their own country, and I would want sentries on the border and us being totally separated. They don't have that on purpose because they want, like I said earlier on, as much of the land with as few people on it as possible. So this idea of, what would you do? I would want a border. I would want a separate country. I wouldn't want to share a territory with people apparently who want to kill me. By the way, that isn't true, right? Most people just want to get on with their lives. Most people, in most places, most of the time.